And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. You're muted. You're muted.
Of course I am, man. I'm so distracted by what's coming for later today's show. So Blake, I have a funny tidbit I think to bring up for
Okay, here we go.
Something that's relevant for conference realignment or not conference realignment, for playoff expansion. So this is going to be the first year of the 12-team playoff, and a lot of people have been able to experience what the 12-team playoff is going to be like with college football 25. So I think to really put into context of what that G5 team is going to be like, I took my Marshall team that was 12-0 to the playoff, and I had to sit in the game after the first quarter because I lost like 48-0 against Clemson. So I just made me think, though, how embarrassingly bad do you think that game is going to be? Because that's something that I feel has not been super talked about. We've talked about it, but that game itself is going to put a real black mark on the playoff itself.
Which one is that you broke out there for just a bit? What game?
The G5 team that gets into the playoff.
So 5 versus 12, it's been a blowout everywhere. So like everybody's saying that 12 team. By the way, I was fighting for my life when I used the Liberty Flames on my back-to-back national title runs. By the way, I have hacked recruiting. I am now
I'm sure
on my 4th number 1 class. I invested the time in going and getting these number 1 classes. It is going to be an absolute bloodbath. And that is what I've been trying to say about this. Put the best 12 in, not F these automatic qualifiers. And Joe, here's another thing. Imagine this. Let's say either Oregon, Ohio State, or Georgia and Texas both get in their conference championship games. The one of them loses and is at 5. Now imagine Georgia, God forbid, having to go up against Liberty. If you thought that Florida State...
I actually think that is going to be so goddamn funny, though, to watch. It sucks. It sucks for competition.
Correct.
It sucks for competition.
So you were talking about competition.
Yeah.
Joe, Georgia's going to have their second string in by midway through the third quarter. So let's not – okay, you wanted it, you begged for it. What, Joe, could you imagine Liberty going across country to Oregon with a high-flying offense and a good defense? Good luck, buddy.
I don't think this is a debate that we've had. I don't think that the automatic qualifiers are bad for just getting into the playoff for the Power 4 conferences. The G5 should not have an automatic qualifier, and it should not give you an automatic bye if you win your conference. That was where I think the mistakes were made. It should just get you into the playoff field. That was where the mess has come to play.
I agree with getting into the playoff field. Now imagine this. Georgia, as a 5 seed, wins and then plays Utah, the number 4 seed. Now what? So who's the better team? Who did more to get there? By the way, Georgia might play more ranked teams in a month than what Utah plays the entire season. Joe, by the way, it could also be double. When we talked about Georgia last night, we didn't go through their schedule in great length. Imagine this. The first time Utah plays a ranked opponent, it might be week 7. So, again, we get to this point. I am just saying, just because you have a loss, it's not always created equally.
Okay. Well, you don't need to rehash that part of the argument. Let me ask you this.
Open up that can of worms, buddy.
Well, let me ask you this question before we get to the lead into the show. Because this is something that we're going to have to do. This didn't even really cross my mind. When we do our projection for the playoff and we do that episode of here are the 12 teams.
We got to pick a G5 team.
Who are you picking?
Liberty.
Just off the top of your head.
Liberty.
Yeah, that probably makes the most sense. Because I maybe could have gone SMU, but SMU's now in the ACC.
SMU's in the ACC.
Right. Yeah, I guess that the answer is probably Liberty. Boise State's maybe a close second. None of those teams are going to be very competitive in the playoff.
No, Liberty, look,
in the playoff.
No, Liberty, look, with Salter and that running game that Liberty has returning and just playing their schedule for the last 2 years on College Football 25, Joe, I don't want to say they have a cakewalk. I won't say that. By the way, I was beating Sam Houston State 42-0 at halftime.
Sam Houston stinks. Sam Houston.
Okay. But they play them though, Joe. So again, we'll see. All right. ACC Media Days we'll get to at the end here, but Jim Phillips, the commissioner, had some big words today, Joe, about we're not going anywhere. I'm glad that he put his foot. I'm glad to hear from Jim Phillips publicly. Joe, I don't want the ACC to crumble. I don't want another conference to crumble. Also, probably the most heated, debated show that will be had today. We'll continue on our deep dives with LSU, and we'll go to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I have a really bad feeling about this show. I think it's going to be one of the most entertaining shows for our listeners. But I think I might need to take the night off from talking to you after this show. I think we're going to end this show and be like, all right, good show. And then it's going to be like
Okay. Well, here's the difference between you and I. Because you're going to have criticisms about LSU, and they're more than likely going to be justified, and I'm going to agree on them. However, you will never never talk crap about Notre Dame.
Go listen to the Notre Dame preview from last year. I have been the only instance where I got over my skis a little bit, where I was overly optimistic, was the Ohio State game. I allowed the early season hype because they had a couple of their deficiencies look better than we were expecting. And I thought that game was winnable. And it was, to that point. They were down to the wire, close game, almost won the game if it wasn't for a couple late mistakes. That was a winnable football game for them. But my point is that last year, I said this to you pre-show, I was very cautious. I'm not still 100% totally bought in that Marcus Freeman for 100% is the guy to get them over the hump. This will be that prove-it season for him. But I think that this is the best team that he's had and one of the best Notre Dame teams that we've seen in the past 5 years. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. And I think a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to agree with me. They have not had a quarterback this gifted as Riley Leonard. Now, I have a huge question mark at the quarterback position, which I will save until we get there. But there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I don't think it's unreasonable to be optimistic. I would honestly charge the opposite on you, that I think that you're going to find ways to find weaknesses, as you always do. You are more critical of Notre Dame than I am positive of Notre Dame. Our listeners would agree with that.
Okay.
So
they won't agree with that.
Go look at the comments of the video from yesterday.
Yeah, because they get one thing. Notre Dame fans, I'll give them this. One thing they will not budge on is when somebody criticizes them in recruiting. They'll accept other things, but they're not going to accept bad recruiting talk. They refuse to do it. Good on them.
Well, all right.
So you talked about that. We'll wait and see about Notre Dame. LSU is also the other team that we'll be breaking down here tonight too.
Yeah, expectations should obviously be high for Brian Kelly, but the main thing I'm going to pose is last year was probably the year that they should have been the most primed to win a title. This can be a great year for LSU, but I just don't know, with what they lost to the draft and some of their position groups still being in flux. I don't think that they're a national championship caliber team this year, but I think that they're a playoff caliber team. I don't think that's an unreasonable take to have.
I think that they do have, and I say this a lot of times, so the people that have heard me, I apologize. They have a lot of question marks that they have to answer. Schedule's very beneficial for them, though. They get Ole Miss and Alabama at home.
Yep.
And Joe, I'm just going to admit, you can say I'm crazy. Okay. I have the same exact worries about them that you're going to say on this show here tonight. Yep. But unbeknownst to everybody in the SEC, they know when people vote down and look down on LSU going into 2019, crazy shit happens going into 2011, going into 2003. Those are normally the years that when LSU's not considered to be one of the top teams, that all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and do something. I don't know how to explain it. I will admit, I don't know how to explain it. Could this be the year for Brian Kelly in year 3? We'll get to that here tonight, too. Any thoughts before we get rolling here about Jim Phillips and ACC Media Days?
No, to get to this question, where's the LSU hat? I'm not wearing the damn LSU hat today. I'm not doing it. This is not not the show for the hat. This is just not the show for me to wear the hat, because to peel back the curtain a little bit, I think you and I can both agree, Blake, it would be really confusing if I am admonishing LSU, which I'm not going to be crazy critical of them, but if you and I are arguing and yelling at each other over if Notre Dame or LSU is the better team, I think a lot of passing by viewers that aren't consistent listeners are going to be like, why is this guy wearing the hat, but he's supporting Notre Dame?
I don't think that you're going to be more critical on them than I have been.
No, I don't. I think that I actually think we're going to be on the same page where the argument's going to stem is going to be Notre Dame.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I am higher on them a little bit probably offensively than you are, but that's a little bit more ticky-tack and just things that I've seen. Because I do think Brian Kelly's still a pretty damn good offensive mind, even though people try to label sometimes that he's not. Let's get rolling. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. If you're on Facebook, share to all those groups, to all of those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and notification bell wherever you listen to podcasts, Joe. Let's hope that they rate, review, and subscribe. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. We break down the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Did you hear Brian Kelly's words the other day at SEC Media Days, Joe? He wants to go to Ireland. Well, we'll go to Ireland, just not the one that you are going to be thinking of. We're back next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right. So, Joe, we continue on our deep dives here. We go to the state of Indiana, to one of the, got to admit, one of the more national brands in the country. Tonight, your favorite school here, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. When we look at them as a whole going into the season, Joe, what are your thoughts on Marcus Freeman going into year 3?
Look, I look at what happened between last year and this year. And I know that last year, and as I said, I was very cautious about what they were going to be capable of doing, because they were still progressing. They were still growing as a team under a head coach that was in his second year. It would be unrealistic and obnoxious. And I've criticized the expectations of Notre Dame fans before on this show. Sometimes Notre Dame fans, we can get a little bit ahead of ourselves. And there's some folks that maybe thought that they could be really good last year. They could have been a playoff caliber team. They just weren't there yet. I think that this season, this Notre Dame squad, because of all that they're bringing back, particularly on the defensive side of the football, that they are good enough to go on a multi-game run in the college football playoff. Because the question here right now isn't today if they're a playoff team. Their schedule is extremely favorable. It's very light. We've talked about it before. Everybody and their mother has talked about how light the Notre Dame schedule is this season. The only real challenges that they have are at the start of the year, going to Texas A&M, they host Florida State, and they go to USC. At the bare minimum, they are on a trajectory to go 11-1. This is the easiest schedule that I have seen them play in the last 10 years that I can think of. So, Blake, there is no reason why this team should not be in the playoff. But my bigger case here is why I think that they can win a game or two in this year's playoff is because of all the defensive pieces that they bring back. A defense that last year in total defense was 5th in the nation. They bring back most of their starting defensive line, most of their linebackers, and a young crop of other backups are stepping into starting roles. I'm really excited to see what Drake Bowen does, who's a fantastic player. But more importantly, they have one of the best collective secondaries in the country, right there behind Georgia. Xavier Watts won the best defensive back in the country award last year, and Benjamin Morrison's going to be a first-round pick. That defense is good enough to carry them. As long as their offense can take a step forward from last year under a brilliantly minded offensive coordinator that was LSU's last year. The most important thing to me, my last point here, Blake, it all just comes down to the health of Riley Leonard. Because Riley Leonard last year was dealing with a serious ankle injury. It was recurring. It was against Notre Dame when he played against Notre Dame. If he is not on the field consistently, the whole expectations for the season goes out the window. They need him on the field. That is a 50-50 flip of what happens with him and his health. But I still stand by this, man. I think that this Notre Dame team is one of the best that I've seen in the past 5 years.
So to your part about the schedule, it is weak. It's not a schedule that you would look at and say, hey, man, this is something that we should fear. It is softer than you would normally expect. No Clemson on there either.
Nope.
So, Joe, they only have 2 true away games, too. The other 2, Navy is going to be at MetLife, and Georgia Tech's going to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So
I think they play Army at Yankee Stadium, too, which is also not really an away game.
No, and I mean, it's not an away game at all. I agree with you in the premise because their schedule is so light. They are good enough to make a playoff, and they're going to be in my playoff because, Joe, quite honestly, like A&M, I know it's in week 1, but down the stretch, you could be, week 9, week 10 and saying, man, how did we lose, hypothetically, week 1 to a Texas A&M team, year 1, game 1 under Mike Elko? Joe, I do think Louisville is still going to be better than people are portraying them to be. Look, you went into that game last year and people thought that, well, Notre Dame.
The home game this year, though.
It is, but a lot of people thought that, Notre Dame would go into that game, us included, and out-physical them, and it was the opposite that actually happened. That running game went off. That offensive line at Notre Dame kind of got pushed around there in the second half. So I do think that there are 3 big games on this schedule. Even 4 if you want to count USC. But for me, it's Florida State, Louisville, and Texas A&M. Being at Kyle Field at night, Joe, weird shit happens. Bottom line, okay? That game could be, Joe, 17-14 going into the fourth quarter. Would not surprise me either way. That place is weird. Think Notre Dame's going to probably win that game, but that's neither here nor there at the current moment. I agree with you on Riley Leonard. I do think that there have been question marks surrounding him nationally. And look, not just Mike Denbrock was the only LSU guy that went there. I think that, there has been some talk between staffs, if you will, about, hey, how's this going for you? Hey, how's that going for you? And I do think that there is a question mark on, can Riley Leonard stay healthy? I mean, you do have to take that chance there, though, with him because he can be so electric. I do, though, Joe. I know that you're going to be mad. I need to see the playmakers at running back and receiver. Not saying that they're not there. Because you did go out into the portal and got Chris Mitchell from FIU, 64 catches, over 1,000 yards last year. Okay, that's fine. However, I need to see it. Now, Mike, I will give Mike Denbrock this. Joe, I think more than anybody, you understand that relationship of him being here the last 2 years and me covering LSU every single day. I love Denbrock. And Denbrock's going to find open dudes. He's going to scheme dudes open. Not going to question that. However, when you go up against Florida State in that defense, I do ask just the simple question, do you have the playmakers that they do? Because I don't know on the outside if you do. I don't know about that, Joe. Fentrell Cypress did pretty good last year against Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors. You don't have a dude like that at all. So defensively, Florida State is going to be an issue. That could be the only game that you lose. Might be at A&M. I don't know. They are going to probably more than likely be a playoff team. But to say offensively that there aren't question marks, I also think is wrong. Not saying that they won't be talented, but you're bringing in a brand new quarterback. You're having to go get a number one wide receiver. Your All-American left tackle leaves. Your great running back leaves. Joe, again, because I feel like because it comes from this show, we won't act like that, okay, well, can Chris Mitchell pan out on the outside? What is the running game going to look under Mike Denbrock with Audric Estime not there? Oh, by the way, you're replacing a quarterback who, Joe, by the way, his real true first snaps in a Mike Denbrock offense is going to be in 3 weeks. How much catch-up does he have to have in the beginning of the season? Those are just questions I have. I'm not demeaning. I'm not trying to come in here and demean.
Okay.
I just don't think that you can look and say, hey, we've got that much to replace, and it's not a question mark.
All right. I'm not going to sit here and blindly say, yes, everything's perfect. This team is one of the best in the country. They've got no holes. I'd be, again, as I said in the lead-in of this segment, I would be a total jackass if I tried to come up here and blindly think that this team was some prolific, elite, unstoppable force. There are things that need to be fixed between this offseason and the start of this season. But I think that they've at least positioned themselves better than some of these other teams that we've talked about, their roster deficiencies that we were uncertain of, to resolve those issues quickly. Chris Mitchell is the type of receiver that they've been missing. Beat you over the top, deep threat, very, very fast. He's going to test really well at the combine. He is that deep threat that they did not have all of last year that you constantly criticize Notre Dame for not having.
And did they have it?
No, they didn't.
Okay. So don't act like I was unjustified.
That's not what I'm saying. Wait, what? That has nothing to do with the point I'm trying. The point I'm trying to make is that now they have one of those options, and they also have.
Are you 1,000% sold that Chris Mitchell in year 5 can come in here and duplicate what he did?
We're not talking about a G5 guy that had no production. That's all traits. He was extremely productive, and he's stepping into an offense that you just mentioned, led by and coached by an offensive coordinator that is great at finding playmakers that can stretch defenses. This is the body type of a guy that he would work with and get really good production out of. Is it not?
I mean, Joe, he had 2 first-round wide receivers and a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback that fell in his lap, to be fair. And I do think that Mike would tell you.
Wait. We can't act like we can't.
He did not recruit them.
Yes, but we can't act like a good amount of credit deserves to go to Mike Denbrock for all of those guys developing.
1,000%.
All right.
What I'm saying is you can't use transitive properties of what Mike did last year with that offense.
It's not a transitive property. Traits apply to scheme. He runs a spread scheme. He needs certain types of receivers.
Joe, now you are defending because
I'm not defending. You're just you're nitpicking. You're nitpicking. You do this every time we talk about them.
Okay. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say about him? Hey, they have a receiver that's coming in that was a 1,000-yard guy last year. Sounds good. No other guy on that team had over 500 yards receiving a year ago. Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
At some point, you have to go out there and prove it. So if I say that there are question marks, by the way, you did the same thing for Kentucky, who's bringing in a G5 guy that had 1,000 yards. You got to do it here for Notre Dame. By the way.
So you're asking the question. I'm agreeing you that there is a question. And what I led in the statement was saying, hey, they're trying to answer it and they're being aggressive in trying to answer it. And your comeback to that was just, they still have to prove it. No shit, they have to prove it. Nothing's been proven yet. They haven't played a game.
That's my point. That is my point. Joe, I could see a scenario where you play Florida State. As an example, they do have more playmakers than you do. They have more dudes on defense than you do.
On defense, yes. Offensively, I don't think that Florida State is not good enough to separate from Notre Dame offensively if Notre Dame sputters.
Very fair.
Can't move the ball.
Yep, very fair, especially with DJU. But down the stretch, I could see that. That's all I'm saying. You can't come in here and, Joe, again, take the golden helmet off for just a moment. Let's act like we're not talking about Notre Dame. If I came to you and said, hey, Joe, you have an offensive lineman at left tackle that's going to be a freshman and 2 sophomores getting full playing time and first-time starters this year. That's number one. You're replacing a quarterback. You're replacing some wide receivers. You're replacing a really good running back. You would also, what you're about to do in just a minute when you talk about LSU is saying, hey, how does LSU offensively replace those guys? And what I am saying here is I think that's the same label that you have to put on Notre Dame. Do teams have question marks? Yes. Do they have talent? Yes. But you can't look at just Notre Dame and say, hey, they're bringing in damn near, Joe, a brand new unit at big key position points. So,
but wait. But if you're gonna present that this blind test team to me, I'd at least ask you the question of who are the guys that are stepping in to replace those roles and to fill those roles. That's important. That's why we do the deep dive, because we look at those guys and we try to figure out how they're going to be.
That's why I said you're bringing in talent. But God forbid I come out here and say, hey, Joe, you have a big-time left tackle that you have to replace that's going to be a true freshman, and then you have 2 sophomores in the interior that are finally going to get some playing time here. You would think that I'm saying something absolutely crazy about, hey, Joe, Riley Leonard, you came out in the open and says, can he stay healthy? He's got a true freshman left tackle and 2 dudes in the interior that are playing for the first time, and you want me to say, hey, Joe, are you 1,000% sure that they stand up?
So just like when we get to the LSU segment and I bring up what does the new group of receivers look like, because it's all pretty much new faces for the most part because the 2 biggest guys are gone, you're going to counter by bringing up, well, so-and-so looked really good in spring practices. Charles Jagasaw was one of the highest recruited.
You act like Tyron Lacey didn't go off on Caleb.
But wait. But this is my whole point is that I have the context to answer the question. You have the context to answer the question for LSU. I can confidently say that I'm not worried about Charles Jagasaw because Charles Jagasaw was a 5-star recruit, looked fantastic in the bowl game, and has been fantastic during the spring. That's not a position and a kid that I'm worried about. There's been times where they've replaced that left tackle spot with guys that stunk, and there was fear that they weren't going to be good. Look, to move this conversation forward, I think why I'm also even more optimistic is that Riley Leonard at Duke did not have anybody to connect with offensively. He did not. He didn't have any playmakers. We saw what he did against Notre Dame before he got banged up. We saw what he did against Florida State before his injury got re-aggravated. More importantly, Mike Denbrock turned Desmond freaking Ridder into a starting NFL quarterback. The NFL thought that he was startable at quarterback.
That's their fault.
He made him look so good.
Both of them got drafted, or one of them.
I'm just saying Denbrock gets the best out of a lot of quarterbacks. And if Riley Leonard's healthy, man, somebody who last year, Mel Kiper had him projected as a first-round pick. A lot of draft analysts last year had him projected as a first-round pick. A lot of people this year really, really like him as a potential early second-rounder, late first-round pick.
Did I say that Riley Leonard was going to suck at any point in this show?
That's
no.
Wait. Just because I'm making a point doesn't mean I'm attacking you. I'm not attacking you. I'm just trying to make a point.
No, you're attacking.
I'm not.
You're like Rhaenyra on House of the Dragon. You're about to say Dracarys and fire's coming from your mouth.
Nothing was directed at you. All I was trying to point out is that, like, hey, this offense is going to be completely different. It's way more dynamic than the Sam Hartman, Audric Estime, let's run into a wall and then fail to convert on third down every single time. There are so many more athletes. Jeremiah Love is an explosive space killer. Chris Mitchell, who we just mentioned a second ago,
all 385 yards of his explosive.
He was a freshman. He was a freshman last year.
Okay, so again, you're saying I know that he's going to be explosive. Again, you're trying to.
You saw how slow Audric Estime was at the combine. That's all I'm saying.
Well, he ran people over. It wasn't his game.
And that version of football doesn't really work anymore. Clearly.
Fair. Defensively, Joe, I think one of the best interior defensive tackles in the country, Howard Cross. Dude was second in the team in tackles at 66 as a nose tackle. Did have 7 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. I think defensively they're going to be really good like they always are under Freeman. I mean, look, man, at this point, the proof is in the pudding with what Marcus can do defensively. I just think they're going to be a top 10, top 15 unit. I think that they are that good. My question becomes, I asked you this earlier, in pre-production. Do they have a premier pass rusher would be my only question. Do they have a guy on third down that can go get the passer?
I just don't think that this isn't the NFL. You don't need a Myles Garrett to produce high sack production. I think that they were underwhelming last year, but I think that the addition of RJ Oben and all of these guys coming back, Jordan Botelho, who got hurt for part of last year, is returning as well. I'm more enticed by the cohesiveness that everybody's coming back and returning. You mentioned Howard Cross. I think he's going to take a really big step forward. Riley Mills, big body guy. He takes up space, not necessarily a production type player. They're well coached enough, and Al Golden is one of the most underrated defensive coordinators in the country, in my eyes. They're going to find ways to produce that. And especially for the fact that they can get a lot of coverage sacks. Their secondary is that good.
So, look, Notre Dame had a top 10 defense last year. They were 7th in the country in scoring defense. I just don't see a lot changing there, okay? And so I don't necessarily disagree that you just need one premier pass rusher. I just, I looked at watched a lot of Jalen Sneed today. I think he could be somebody at that rover position that can do it. He had 4 sacks a year ago. I don't know if I necessarily see holes. I do wonder, Joe, if there's a game that maybe they're off. The only thing that I would worry about with Notre Dame that I have a question mark on, you talked about earlier, could they win a playoff game or two? Look, sometimes defenses are just off their game. I don't know how to explain it. We saw Saban have multiple playoff times where his defenses got absolutely abused. Can they keep up with teams offensively? Maybe would be the only question. If the defense has a bad day, I don't know. But this defense is going to be really good, man. That would be the only things that I could pick holes in. I think they're a playoff team. I think at worst, maybe they're 10-2. That should be the floor. I don't know if they go undefeated. I will just say, though, Joe, they can answer a lot of questions week one. A lot of questions in week one against Texas A&M.
That's one thing that really stood out to me, and that's kind of the one thing I'm hanging my hat on here, is that how do they play against Texas A&M? Mike Elko's first game facing off against a team that he knows, a quarterback that he knows really well. What happens in that game? I think if Notre Dame, there's 2 ways for them to really prove, and I think incite a lot of confidence in supporters of Notre Dame, not just Notre Dame fans, but those that are pushing for them to be a top team this year. If they win by 5+ points, I think that at least makes you feel good about them. If they win by more than a score, that's enough fuel for the fire to say, hey, they stepped into a hostile environment. They looked much more potent offensively, and their defense is as good as expected. If they can do that, that to me is going to put them on a much higher trajectory and could be a huge, huge momentum builder. I'm glad they're not playing Navy week 1, because I think that they need a game like this to get themselves rolling.
I will say, people forget about Connor Wegman. Okay, what he did at the end of 2022, and then what he was doing in the beginning of 2023. Joe, Billy Lucci made a really good point that last week at SEC Media Days. The headlines were reading before Connor Wegman went down, hey, is he one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the SEC? That was the national headline of Texas A&M. I don't want to say, though, Joe, I think Moose Muhammad is someone that could be special for them. A lot of those guys Jimbo recruited are still there that were highly talented. I don't think it's going to be – I don't think A&M's as bad as people think that are going to make them. So if you can go in there and win, I agree with you. It's going to be a really big deal.
Yeah, but we all know this isn't a score projection yet, or a game prediction. We already did a really loose one, and that was where I got.
No, I'd make one. I think it's within 7. I think Notre
Dame. I think they realistically can win by 7 to 10 points. I think that's totally doable for them.
Very doable. But I've seen this. I've seen people saying that, oh, well, Notre Dame's going to go in there and blow them out. No, you're not.
That's not going to happen. I'm not dumb enough to think that is on the radar for them. That would be asinine to try to throw out there that they're going to blow Texas A&M out of the water. Could it happen? It absolutely could. Is it likely? No. I think that you would have to be really, really, your head would have to be in the clouds to think that something like that is guaranteed to happen.
All right, you want to get on the LSU here?
Yeah. Oh wait, we got a super chat.
Super chat.
Can we get to that really quick?
Yeah. Cody McGee sends a $4.99 super chat. Says, "Is this Marcus Freeman's make it or break it year at Notre Dame?"
I think that it is, but to better define that, if it is his make or break year, he just needs to get to the playoff. I think if he gets to the playoff, let me rephrase. If he doesn't get to the playoff with this week of a schedule, that's when I think everybody is going to start to get really, really, really uneasy. A lot of Notre Dame fans are going to be saying, how did you manage to fail to get this team to the playoff with that week of a schedule? There are such a low barrier of entry. I think that certainly it could be a make or break year for him.
I'm going to say no, because I still think you have to give a first-time coach some grace.
Yeah, but like with everything that they've got, if they fail to get there, don't you think that'd be really brutal? If
what's your thoughts on Ryan Day?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, Ryan Day is in the same boat. People put him in the same boat. It's not that he sucks as a coach. Maybe you just do have to wait a little bit longer than 3 years with a coach. That's again a first.
Well, I'm not asking him to win. I'm not asking him to win a national championship. I don't think a national championship is going to happen this year. I'm not asking him to win one.
No, I know.
Ryan Day is a different circumstance. He took over a national championship caliber team.
Let me ask you this question, because we got to get to LSU. We got to get moving.
Okay.
Let me ask you this question: what if Marcus Freeman does miss the playoffs or is one and done in the playoffs? What's the perception really going to? I think the headline reads, "Is it a Notre Dame issue?"
If they're one and done in the playoffs, no, I don't think that. For what you just said a second ago, you got to give a guy time to.
No, I'm asking you what the perception would be, not what I think. What the perception would be.
Naturally, the national perspective is going to be down on Notre Dame. I think a lot of Notre Dame fans would be satisfied if they got to the playoff, and as long as they don't get blown out like they've done in the past, I think that most Notre Dame fans would be satisfied.
Let's get to LSU here. All right, Joe, we continue on our deep dives. Today we go down to my home state. See, I've been to your – actually, I didn't go to your home state in New Jersey, but I did go to New York. We go down to Baton Rouge. We talk about the LSU Tigers in another deep dive. People have heard me. They know what I think of this team. I'll kick the ball over to you. What do you think of the LSU Tigers going into 2024?
Is this a trap? Is this a trap that I'm being given the first words on this? Okay.
I always give you the first words because I let you ramble about shenanigans for 40 minutes, and then the people come and hear the truth here. Okay.
All right. LSU's case, as I said in the open, I think that as Brian Kelly has really taken this team and transformed them since he took over from Ed Orgeron, the floor is really high for this program. I think that Garrett Nussmeier, as a lot of people are expecting, could have a really, really huge season. I think that offensively, there's really no question marks. There's not. Even though the fact that they're replacing 2 first-round wide receivers, they had enough depth at the position. They've always recruited well at that position, and they also did an effective job of going in the transfer portal to bring in C.J. Daniels, who was one of the most productive receivers in the country this past year. Offensively, they're going to have no issues. They're not going to produce as many points and yards as they did last year because Jaden Daniels had a ridiculously historic season. But their backbone is going to be offensive production. I just have to say, and I have to bring it up, and I think you agree with me. I don't think, specifically at their defensive line, I think that their secondary has room to improve and to progress. But I feel as though that Brian Kelly has not done a great job of recruiting their defensive line. And also, as we talked about, did a really poor job in the portal, being one of the front runners for any top defensive lineman in the portal. They just weren't even in the conversation. I just feel really uneasy about this situation going into the year. Their best guy is a guy who came from Grand Valley State, and he's fine. He's not great. Mm-hmm. That was the really late ad that they had to bring in.
Yeah, Javier Suggs.
Yeah, big question mark. Big question mark on the D-line.
I agree with you. Offensively, I don't think you're going to put up the same type of offense. I do think there'll be a top 10 offense, though. I still think that they're productive. I think they're going to lean along the offensive line. Joe, I'm going to be a little honest with you. I think that they're going to get to some, hey, man, we're going to line it up and punch you right in the mouth. I don't think they're going to waste any time in doing it necessarily. And I think Brian Kelly wants to slow the game down a little bit more. I think people need to get familiar with Caleb Jackson, okay, the running back. Joe, he was the kid last year that almost had the kick return for a touchdown at 230 pounds. I think ran a 23.6 miles per hour. Super freak. That's why I believe, like, even the thing that went viral of him running the dude over at Mississippi State, it got clipped like the Leonard Fournette thing. Dude's a super freak. Offensively, you're right, because of their dominant offensive line. I don't really know if I have issues with them. I do question something, though, offensively. I do question depth at running back. And, hey, man, you do have to replace 2 first-round wide receivers, okay? Like, you do. Now, you have a quarterback that's got experience and then takes the next step at that same program with same receivers, so you don't feel as bad going into it. Xavier Thomas, Joe, I think is somebody who was at Mississippi State a year ago that people need to get familiar with too. I agree with you, though, defensively. Look, I do think they're actually more athletic defensively than people give them credit for. By the way, Joe, LSU, who only sent 5 guys in pressure 10% of the time last year, was 40th in the country in sacks. They didn't send pressure at all. I do wonder if Blake Baker does start sending the heat a little bit more, because they do have guys on the edge that can rush. What do you do with Harold Perkins? They got athletes in the second and third level. I agree with you in the interior of the defensive line. I don't know what they're going to do at the boundary at corner. I still think the same question marks that they have or had last year is the same question marks that they had going into this year. And I don't think that it's changed. Now, Joe, here's the ultimate question, what's going to be for LSU defensively. If you're looking at it as a whole, was it scheme with Matt House, or was it personnel?
I think it was a horrible mix of both. I think it was the
perfect. The third thing, is it a horrible mix of both?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. With guys like Harold Perkins that are out there, and it's not like you don't have a 5-star in Deshaun Womack. It's not like you had a top 32 guy in Braden Swinson. It's not like, Joe, that they didn't recruit at a very high level here. I do think they got a lot of athleticism. I just don't know. I think they got 2 big areas of weakness that overshadows that. Joe, let's think about it like this. Ole Miss couldn't run on the edge last year. The LSU got pressure on them. It was the interior of the defensive line that got absolutely abused. Secondary, it was what it was. Final point here, and I'll kick it back over to you. It doesn't miss me that you questioned LSU secondary, who was 114th in the country in passing yards allowed, and you wouldn't do Texas. Now, I will remind you that LSU does have the same blue chip ratio as Texas does in their secondary. So I just remind you stuck up for Texas's secondary yesterday, and LSU was only 114th, 1 spot behind them.
Yeah, hold on. I was pulling your chain a little bit when we were pre-show. I said this a second ago when you let me talk first. I think that I'm going to be willing to give the LSU secondary the benefit of the doubt, like I did with Texas's, because I think it was the case of mixing and matching, getting young guys in, not really knowing what to do. Secondary is a position where if you don't have experienced players and you don't have the right scheme to match with their talent like they did last year, it leads to disastrous failure. But where I am, and I think where I am like really raising the red flag going, this does not look good, is the interior of that defensive line. If you do not have the bodies that are powerful, that are flexible, that are explosive, that don't just come firing off the ball 100 miles an hour, there was no real replacement for Mason Smith and Justin Jefferson and those guys. Not Jordan Jefferson.
You're talking about, yeah, it's Justin Jefferson. But you're talking about Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
No, I'm talking about the defensive line. Well, I mean, who's the other damn defensive?
Jordan Jefferson, Smith, and Kai Wingo.
Those are 3 guys that not all of them were very consistent last year. They're gone. So not only are you replacing a group that struggled, who the heck are you replacing them with? And I look at their schedule knowing the one game that actually might scare me a little bit that you're not going to agree with. It helps them that they're playing Alabama at home. But I look at Alabama's interior offensive line. That's one of the best parts of their O-line. They've got 2 really good guards that the NFL really freaking likes in Tyler Booker, and I forget the name of the other guard that they have. that could be brutal for them if they are smart enough to attack them right up the middle and just run the ball right up the middle in short yardage situations and not overthink it. That could really kill them and hurt them down the line in important games and in close situations.
So we say that all about LSU, but you look at their schedule. Joe, I do think the biggest game on their schedule right now today is obviously USC. You got to start off the year winning and beating USC.
They're going to beat the shit out of them. I don't think that game's going to be close.
Okay, you say that, but we'll see. Okay, Joe, they got 2 other games on their schedule. I mean, let's say they lose to Ole Miss and Bama. So then they're 10-2, and they're back where they were a year ago. That makes they're going to the playoffs if they go 10-2. Bottom line. They're not going to live at 10 SEC team out that's got 10 wins in the conference.
That's my point, is that their schedule is very favorable to the point where theoretically shit hits the fan. They don't beat either of those teams. A 10-2 SEC team gets in the playoff. They're not a championship caliber team. They're just not. There are more well-balanced, well-rounded teams above them that will beat them in the playoff. They can get there. I just don't know how far they make it. It depends on what matchup they get in the first round. If they get a Big 12 team, I'm sure that they would win.
What if they have to at home at night, Death Valley Tiger Stadium? Do they beat a team that maybe is more talented that comes in there? I mean, look, I agree with the path that you're on here.
Yeah.
The
other thing I was going to say is, say they have to play. Say they have to play Oregon. Say they have to play Ole Miss. They get a rematch against Ole Miss. Like those are circumstances that would be just terrible, terrible matchups if they get handed some of the more talented teams in the playoff field. And frankly, the real reality here is that LSU being 10-2, not going to the SEC championship game, could be higher seeded than a better team that they face. And what I mean by that is like
Ole Miss.
Like Ole Miss could go to the SEC championship game and have 3 losses and be a lower seed than LSU and haven't already beaten LSU. That's totally on the table to happen.
Mm-hmm. Could happen. I'm not going to – I've said this. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not putting them in the playoff. Go show me. I'm not putting – yeah, go show me. Because, listen.
They'd have to really shit the bed to not be – it's just like – Notre Dame.
I mean, if we're being honest,
they don't have Texas or Georgia.
Well, think about it like this: in year 1, they were a game against 5-7 Texas A&M away from being a 10-2 regular season team.
Brian Kelly does like shit in the bed against teams he's supposed to blow out.
Well, that's not a Brian Kelly thing at this place. Les did that shit too.
Okay.
Les and Ed did that shit too. So I'm not going to put it all on him. That's got to come from within in that locker room and the leadership that you have. I'm not going to put them there because for me, if I come out here and say that they're going to be a playoff team, gets completely misconstrued by a fan base, our own fan base, I'm not going to do it. Joe, they got to prove in these big games. Oh, look, under the last 2 years, Brian Kelly's defense on third down has been atrocious. Atrocious. And he has said this. It's not like I'm just like putting down on the man. He's come out in press conferences and said, hey, we stink on third down. Okay. Thank you for at least admitting it. There are things that they got to prove. I will admit this. Something that I don't think that people have talked about enough. I don't think people understand, though, with LSU, which always happens at this place for whatever reason. Joe, they got some athletes at end, at linebacker, and at safety. If there is some glowing hope on the edges and in that middle, they got some dudes now. I'm not going to take that away from them. I don't think that shit was scheme thing. Like, I could see Harold Perkins. Joe, they ran away from Harold Perkins last year after one game in the interior. Mm-hmm. Okay, against a team that runs counter and trap the whole time. Yes, it's going to be a horrible game for him. Joe, that's not the same player that I saw a year ago. Like, during the spring, it's just Harold. He's not. Now, I'm going to use what I've seen off of it, but we'll just have to wait and see. Secondary and D-line interior do scare me. I will admit, I'm with you 100% there.
So you brought this up with Notre Dame, Texas A&M being the real defining game. I think that this Alabama game is going to be the real defining one. I don't think it's Ole Miss because Ole Miss is going to be a hard-fought battle. It's between two top teams. But I would argue that how they play against Alabama at home is going to really tell us at that point in the season if they're good enough to go on to the playoff. If they beat LSU or if they beat Alabama or maybe they lose by less than a score, that to me defines that answer of, are they going to finish 10-2? Are they going to go on to be one of the last playoff teams in?
We'll see, man. I'm going to push back on one thing.
Okay.
I don't disagree because Nick Saban is gone and Kalen DeBoer being there. That game means a lot because LSU fans are going to be like, hey, man, Nick's gone. It's time. Like, you can't use that excuse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, man, they can't lose to Ole Miss at home. Not after last year. So I do agree with you on Bama. You lose that Magnolia Bowl at home, them old rich white-haired dudes that pay you all that NIL money who hate Ole Miss more than they hate Alabama. Okay, but I'm just listen to your boy. They would,
I get that. I mean, I don't know the rivalries.
They would accept the loss to Alabama right now before they would Ole Miss.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
The old men that hate Mississippi? Oh, God, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, but I think that Ole Miss is the slightly better team than LSU.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not.
That's gonna be a brutal night for some folks.
Hey, let me ask you a question before, since we did both of them. Number one, did you think that it was going to be worse than this on how we were going to scream at one another?
No, I knew what was going to happen. We were going to come in the pre-show. We were going to get all of the negative energy out in the pre-show, and then we were going to just.
Secondly, have you done a dynasty yet with your Fighting Irish?
No, I refuse to do so. You know where I landed?
I can't do it. I can't do it. Oh, so you were at Marshall. Where are you now?
So this is a weird turn of events. Boston College. Bill O'Brien turned Boston College into like a championship caliber team.
And he left for the NFL?
And then left for another job. I don't know where he went. And then that was the only job I got offered. So I took over this insanely good Boston College team. So I didn't have to do any of the work. It's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me.
You want to hear something wild? I took over Arkansas, and because none of their players went into the draft, like literally they had 0, I have 37 seniors. Their entire offensive line is a 90 and above.
Oh, my God.
I'm
jealous of that.
The game gets harder as you go. If you got a bunch of seniors on your roster, oh, shit. Dude, I'm literally beating the dog shit out of dudes with Arkansas. All I do is line up and run the football.
Arkansas was my team that I played with NCAA 14. I had like a 15-year dynasty with them. I had like this.
Actually, believe it or not, TCU.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
I do remember you telling me that. I went on
like a 20-year run with TCU. Had 2 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks that were on the same team. I used one year and then used the other the next.
That's ridiculous.
I could do it. Whatever style I wanted to play. All right, Joe, before we get out of here, Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, had some big words today. Before we get out of here, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised. I mean, it was kind of expected that he was going to show up and not put the hammer down. It's just kind of a statement to clear the air. They were expecting him to provide a comment, and he did. And all he basically said was that the quote was, "Forceful movements deserve forceful support and leadership." So he's basically trying to say, like, hey, we're not trying to put the hammer down and be a bunch of assholes. We're kind of just trying to like clear a path for the right direction. And I would argue that this year could be a really big year for the conference and for the ACC. And if Jim Phillips is talking the talk and the ACC looks as good as we're kind of projecting that they could be, and maybe they've got 2 playoff teams this year and it's really competitive, maybe that's enough for them to keep Florida State and Clemson, and then they feel a little bit better about the situation.
You know who's quiet in all this shit? Miami. Miami hadn't said nothing.
Well, because you know what? Miami's smart. They're not dumb in thinking that the grass is greener in a conference where they would immediately become the middle of the pack. Miami knows that if those teams leave, they run the ACC, which is a brilliant, smart decision.
Pretty brilliant decision. And by the way, if you have a clear path to the playoff, you got name notoriety. I mean, Miami could be an independent and make, because of name notoriety, they can go 10-2, and people say, "Bro, the U is back. Put them in the playoff," and they get in the playoff and they get destroyed, and they never should have been there. Miami's the only one that's being the most quiet in all this. Joe, I don't think that Florida State and Clemson are going to the SEC. I'm not going to rehash that.
I don't think it's going to happen either. I'm not going to disagree with you.
Oh,
I just don't think it's happening right now.
So I kind of feel like Florida State and Clemson might be in a little bit of a pickle unless they go independent. It's the only other thing I can think. Strike a deal with ESPN, do what you got to do, make your own schedules. But no, I don't.
Well,
and here's the thing: Notre Dame has a light affiliation with the ACC, right? Like it's not like that they can't fill their schedule. Florida State, try to fill your schedule if you go independent and the ACC doesn't want to deal with you. The SEC is not going to be playing. They're going to be playing conference games. The Big Ten's going to be playing conference games. The Big 12's going to. Here's the question, Joe: who do they play?
That's actually a really good point. It's kind of funny to consider. They're like put up this big stink and they're willing to waste a bunch of money. And they also were aggressive in saying to the ACC, like, "Hey, we need to change the payout structure." Why aren't they like maybe trying to change the amount of games in conference that they have to play? If they feel like that the competition level isn't that high, why not argue for less conference games and then deliberately go and schedule more premier teams? If you want to make more money and you want to get more national spotlight games, that's how you do it. That's what Notre Dame does. Notre Dame isn't doing it this upcoming year.
It's what Bama does. It's what Georgia does. It's what – I mean, Clemson's literally doing it. I mean, Florida State literally just did it. So, yeah, I agree with you. Look, I don't want conferences to go under. I don't – you know, what's ironic, people think the Pac-12 is dead, like completely. You know the Pac-12 is still a thing. They just have two teams, okay?
Sure.
So, I just – look, I know you want more money. Let's see if Jim Phillips can figure it out. All right. Good show.
Good show. We kept Notre
Dame still's going to stink. They're going to lose their first game of the playoff.
Bad take.
Is it, though?
Actually, that is a pretty reasonable take.
Very quickly, went on Oklahoma radio today. I don't know why Oklahoma and Texas A&M people hate me so much. I had an Oklahoma host, an A&M host. They were like, "Hey, Blake, remember when you talked shit about A&M and went viral?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, here we go."
What station did you go? Were you on?
Someone in Norman. I forget the station.
Were they nice at least?
They were great. They were great. I'm just saying. All right, we'll see y'all on Wednesday. Any thoughts on who we're going to do on Wednesday?
I need to check. We might be out of teams.
We didn't do Louisville. That's one that comes to mind.
Oh yeah, we left the best for last.
All right, you say that they're going to beat the dog shit out of Notre Dame, and you ain't going to be saying nothing.
Well, I don't think we did Texas A&M, so maybe that is
okay.
All right, we'll figure out what we're doing.
See y'all on Wednesday. Peace.